You know, one of the cool things about doing a show like this is that we get all kinds of questions and emails from gearheads asking for help and advice on their projects. And that is great. That is what a show like this is for. I mean, we get questions like, how do I plan a project? And what is the best bang for the buck? And what kind of tools do I really need? Well, sometimes the best way to answer these questions is to demonstrate it with a project. And that's what we've got going here with a project called the Knucklebuster. Because this is something that just about anybody can do, provided you're not afraid to bust your knuckles a little bit. The Knucklebuster is a '73 Chevy pickup that was pretty much left for dead in the early '90s. And that makes it a great example of all the '70s, '80s, and '90s vehicles out there that are sitting in garages and backyards all across this nation that you can pick up for cheap. But the idea here is to not do a full ground-up restoration or a full-on show car. No, what we're after here is something that's reliable enough to drive every day, has great power and performance, still gets good gas mileage, it's affordable, and it looks good enough that if you do want to put it in a car show, you can put it in and be proud of it. Last week, we upgraded the suspension with a 3/4 drop, put larger disc brakes all around, and slid on a modern wheel and tire combination of 18s and 20s to give this thing a more current look. This week, we're going to tackle one of the major issues that everybody faces when they dive into a project: engine and drivetrain. And there it is, an old worn-out 350 with all kinds of leaks and all kinds of evidence of some pretty creative mechanical work here. Now, when you're faced with a situation like this and you don't know the history, you don't know what kind of hacking's been done over the years on something, the best thing to do is pull it all out and just start over. That way you can methodically handle all the problems as they come up, and when you're all done, everything is new. That way you don't accidentally keep something like this that can cause you a serious problem down the road. Since the whole drivetrain is going to come out, the easiest way to do this is to pull off the whole front clip. That way you'll have complete and total access to the drivetrain and the front end. With that done, pulling out the engine and transmission is a breeze. Now, if you are going to reuse your stock wiring harness, make sure that you take a few minutes and mark where they go. This will help you when you go to put the project back together. However, as old and brittle as this stuff gets, it's best just to replace it. There it comes. Oh, like butter. That's why we call it the Knucklebuster. Okay, just a hair higher. Pull it back. Okay, take it up. Okay, pull it back. We're clear. Now it's cleanup time. And if you haven't decided on a color for your vehicle, this is the time to do it. You got great access to the firewall and the frames, a perfect time to paint them. Now, for this truck, we're going to use this SEM Hot Rod Black. Now, it's not a flat black, it's a satin color, which is just going to make this truck look evil. So that's what's going to go into the hood, too. All right, when it comes to a new engine, most people will go with some sort of a crate engine because that's a lot easier than rebuilding this. So we went to our buddies at Style & Trucks and got this GM Performance 350 crate engine. Now this thing is kicking out 350 horsepower, which makes it a lot more powerful than that, and it's gonna make that truck a lot of fun out on the road. The problem is, as you can see, it's not the most attractive thing, and there's no accessories here on the front. But we got the solution to both of these problems. Come on. This is a complete GM Performance accessory system designed to go right with that crate engine. Now take a look at this, man. You got all kinds of pulleys and hardware. You got a new alternator, a new air conditioning compressor, new power steering pump, all kinds of brackets, everything that you're gonna need to put a modern serpentine system onto your engine. Now, the key to any good-looking engine is the right amount of paint, polish, and detail. So, to make all this stuff look good, we're not only gonna paint it, we're also gonna add these accessories we got from Summit Racing. Now look at this. These are Cal Custom finned aluminum valve covers, matching breathers, and a matching air cleaner, and a matching oil pan. Now, once we get all this stuff painted up and detailed, you're gonna be surprised how good it looks. All right, with the engine painted, first thing we're gonna put on is this oil pan. Now, one thing that a lot of people overlook when they're putting on custom accessories is hardware. For example, you don't want to put that old nasty junk up against a polished and painted engine. No. So what do? Well, you may want to invest in one of these Gardner Westcott dress-up kits. And this is all polished stainless steel hardware for the oil pan, the intake manifold, the headers, pretty much all of your exterior accessories. And this particular kit comes with a little bow tie embossed right in the heads for a really cool custom look. Of course, you can get them for Ford, Chevy, Dodge, pretty much anything you're working on. We'll follow that up with the valve covers, the breathers, and the air cleaner, and we've got an engine that looks a lot different than what we started with. Hey, welcome back to Gearz, where we are dealing with the one area that every gearhead is going to have to eventually deal with on their project. I'm talking about a sick engine and drivetrain and all that other mess that's under the hood. Now, as you can see, we've already got the old engine and transmission laid to rest, and we've got a brand new, nicely detailed crate engine getting ready to go in the truck. But not yet. No, because now with all this junk out of the way, it's the perfect time to deal with all this other mess under the hood. As you can see, this old steering box is leaking all over the place, and it's completely worn out, as is all of this steering linkage. Now, if you replace your suspension components like we did last week, and you leave all of this junk, well, what you're going to end up with is a cool lowered truck that still wanders all over the road. You don't want that. The good news is all of this stuff is cheap and it's just a phone call away. Let's take a look. The steering parts come from a place called LMC Truck. And if you've got an old truck, you need to pick up one of their catalogs because these guys carry just about anything that you can imagine. And most of this stuff would be really hard to find at a local auto parts store. For example, we've got a brand new power steering box and all the hoses. We have a new center link, new inner and outer tie rod ends with adjusters. We have the idler arm and a pitman arm. Now, instead of just bolting these things on all black and ugly, once again, we took just a few minutes and painted them with this Rust-Oleum hammer tone paint. This is about the toughest thing that you can spray on right out of a can. So you save yourself some money there, and as you can see, it looks incredible. Now, we also got some stuff that did not come stock on the truck, like front and rear sway bars and a steering stabilizer. Now, the rear sway bar and the steering stabilizer both came, once again, from LMC Truck because these are for a stock application. They'll just bolt right on. The front sway bar, we got that from Style and Trucks because remember, we have modified control arms on this truck. So we needed a sway bar that would work with the modified control arms. Now, this is really important when you are piecing something together like this that you order the right parts so you don't have a big surprise when you go put it all together. Now, all of this stuff, along with that lowered suspension, is going to make that truck handle like crazy, which is something it did not do when we first drove it. Installing the new steering box and linkage is pretty much a bolt-in deal once you got everything cleaned up and painted. And it's definitely a lot easier with the front clip removed. The new sway bar utilizes existing holes in the frame, and once again, it just bolts into place. Wow, what a difference a few $100 in just a couple hours makes. Check it out. Now, we are going to deal with this mess. Because remember, we got brand new brakes on this thing, and then this old nasty master cylinder. So, we're going to replace that with this one from Stainless Steel Brakes and a power booster, because we want to put on power brakes. Now, servicing and maintaining brakes brings up a whole bunch of questions. So that brings up this. Tool Tech, brought to you by Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals since 1919. You know, everybody understands how important your brakes are. But when it comes to bleeding or flushing the system, that's where things get iffy for a lot of folks. So for today's Tool Tech, we're going to feature some tools from Phoenix Systems. They're going to completely change the way you approach your brakes and keep them working to their full potential. Okay, the first thing that we're going to look at is bleeding the brakes. Now, in the past, the scenario has always been you get Cousin Eddie or Aunt Thelma inside pushing on the pedal while you're down opening and closing the bleed screws at the wheels. And in doing this, hopefully you run all the air down and out through the bleed screws. The problem with this, other than Cousin Eddie hitting the pedal at the wrong time, is that you're shoving that air in exactly the wrong direction. The air wants to rise. So Phoenix Systems came out with this tool called the Max Pro, and instead of pulling the air down through the lines, it forces the fluid in at the caliper or the slave cylinder. Then it pushes all the air up and out the top of the master cylinder reservoir, which is where it wanted to go anyway. And in just a few short minutes, you have got the best, firmest pedal that you can get. And the good news is, this is something one guy can do. No more Cousin Eddie. And this system works great on any small hydraulic system, brakes, clutches, whatever you're working on. Now, a lot of you know that you have to change your fluid from time to time, purge the system. The question is, when do you do it? I mean, this isn't just something you look at the fluid and say it's dirty, it's time to change it. That is where these brake strips come in, because these measure the amount of copper in the fluid, and the copper level goes up as your corrosion increases, and high levels of copper can damage your expensive ABS systems in your newer vehicles. So, copper is not a good thing. To test, all you have to do is dip the strip into the fluid and wait for it to change color. The darker the purple it gets, the more copper you got in your fluid. As you can see, it's time to flush this system and put in some new fluid. So, if you are serious about keeping your brakes in top working condition, man, forget about the way you've done it in the past. Check out these tools from Phoenix Systems at brakebleeder.com. They will make your life a whole lot easier, which is what a good tool is supposed to do. All right, now it's time to get back on the Knucklebuster project. With the engine all cleaned up and detailed, it's ready to go in the vehicle, right? Well, you know, we do need to do something about the transmission. So instead of rebuilding that old nasty one, we got this new B&M Turbo 350 and this 2400 whole shot torque converter from Summit Racing. Now this combination is going to give us great launches, going to give us firm shifts, and plenty of beef to handle that 350 horse or more if we want to add it later on. The first thing to do is install the torque converter into the transmission, making sure it's seated all the way in. Then bolt the transmission and converter to the engine. And finally lay it all to rest in its new home. That's awesome, man. With the engine in place, now comes the fun part, because it's time to start putting your accessories on. Now we've got some ceramic coated headers from Style & Trucks. We've got new throttle cables from Locar. We've got all of our brakes and all of our other accessories. Now is the time to put them on. All right, here we go. Quite a bit different than what we started out with. Now, we're just about ready to put the front clip back on this thing. But before we do that, a few things I want to show you. Now, we've been pretty lucky on this project because most of these original body panels are really solid, but not all of them. Take a look at this. This core support's rusting out here in the bottom. The cancer goes all the way under the battery here and into these inner fenders. So, we're going to replace those with this new core support and inner fenders from LMC Truck. Now these are just bolt-on replacements, so once you get them on, then you can put your front clip back on. All right, the last thing that you want to consider when you're doing this kind of major engine surgery is your cooling system. Now if your radiator looks like that, you got yourself a problem. And we're gonna deal with that problem with this new aluminum radiator from Flexolite. Now check this thing out. It's a big, heavy-duty radiator, not only designed for that engine, but for air conditioning or whatever hot situation we want to subject it to. Now, for fans, we got these dual electric fans that are built right for this radiator, and they're designed to give us enough airflow to keep everything cool. Now, to go with this, we also got an auxiliary transmission cooler because we want that transmission to survive for a long time. The best part is all of this stuff pretty much bolts in place of that. You know, one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they put a more powerful engine and transmission in their project is that they don't do anything about the rear end to help you get that power to the pavement. Now, granted, most people would want a locker or a limited slip in the rear of their vehicle, but they don't do it because they don't think they can. And that is where you're wrong, because this is something that you can do. But to prove that, we got to go back in time, back to where the rear end was out of this vehicle. There it is, the area that most gearheads avoid like a trip to the doctor, which is ironic because inserting a locker into this rear end is simple and won't hurt a bit. Trust me, I'm a doctor. Okay, the first thing that comes out is the pinion shaft. We're going in. Now you can push in the axles to release the C-clips, and then just pull out the axles. Now that that's over, it's time to have some fun, because we are going to gut this case and get rid of all this bad stuff, starting with these spider gears, followed with the side gears. All right, now that we've got everybody in a state of panic here, we probably ought to show you the locker that we're going to use. Now, we got this from Summit Racing. It's built by Power Tracks, and it basically replaces everything we just took off with a functional locker. Now, come on in here, check this out. You got drivers, you got couplers, you got spacers, and then you've got a few springs. That is it. This is how to put it on. First, we'll grease up the teeth of the drivers and the spacers, and seat the saddle springs into their holes. Then install the couplers into the case where the side gears were. At this point, the ring gear side axle can be slid back in and the C-clip installed. Next, we're ready for the driver and spacer assemblies, and the ring gear side goes in first, followed by the other side. Okay, with the drivers in place, we've got to do something to keep them there. So we're just going to rotate this axle about a quarter of a turn, revealing that spring slot. Then we'll take these little springs, double them up, and pop them in the slot. Now, at this point, you're probably getting a little concerned because it seems like we have forgotten to put on the other C-clip that holds this axle in place. And obviously, there's no room to put it on now, right? Now, all you got to do is rotate the axle. Look at this. You got a slot right there. Drop in the clip, and pull out on the axle to seat it. Of course, the final piece to go in is the new pinion shaft and the retaining bolt to hold it in place. And you've got yourself a locker. All right, we are all done in here. So now we're going to clean up this housing, put a coat of paint on there so this thing looks great when we put it back in the truck. The last piece that we're going to put on to go with these disc brakes is this polished aluminum cover we got from Summit Racing, because that will give us a great looking rear end, which is always important. And now, what are you working on? For today's What Are You Working On, we have got a project that takes a little different direction than what you're used to. Now this comes from Carl Schaefer from Mississippi, and he started out with a really nice car. He had a 67 Ford Fairlane 500, here's a shot of it, and it only had 65,000 original miles on it. So you're thinking, end of story, right? Oh no, because Carl left the car in a garage in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina came through. So the house was destroyed, the garage was destroyed, and the car was destroyed. And according to Carl here, he said, I spent the next year restoring it because I didn't have a house to work on. That's positive thinking there. Here's a shot of the car being stripped down, all the metal being repaired. He said his good friend Tom Wilson helped him repaint it the original color, and then they replaced everything. Here's a shot of the new motor, a 351 Windsor. Here's also a shot of the new black interior, seats, headliner, the whole thing. So how did it turn out? Here's a shot of Carl in his best Dale Earnhardt stance, standing beside his new Ford. Now, the best thing about this project, though, is he took something that was totally destroyed, brought it back to life, and made it better than it was before, and he did it himself. I mean, this is a great story. Now, the rest of you guys, I know you're working on something, man. Send some pictures in. I don't care if it's an old project, new project, whatever. Send it into GearzTV.com. We'll see if we can get it on the air. All right, that takes care of it for today. We need to take a break from the Knucklebuster, and you need to go out and bust your own knuckles.